If you can hear my voice right now, it means a few things went right today. It means the generator started. It means the wire I ran up the stairwell is still holding. It means the antenna on the roof is still standing after last night's wind. It also means you are still alive, and you still care enough to listen to a stranger talk into the dark. I am not going to dress this up. No slogans, no big speeches. I am here because talking keeps people moving, and people who keep moving sometimes make it. I am here because I promised myself on day one that if I found a way to send my voice farther than the next room, I would do it. If you are alone, you do stupid stuff. If you are scared, you do worse stuff. A voice that sounds calm can keep somebody from doing the worst thing he has planned for the next 5 minutes. My name is Daniel Mercer. I am 41 years old. I used to run sound and do on-air for a small local station in Missouri. The kind of place where you read school closings and argue about potholes with angry callers and then go home thinking your job does not matter. 1 year ago, my job started mattering fast. I do not have a studio anymore, not the old one. I am in the second floor office of a county emergency management building outside Columbia, Missouri. If that name means anything to you, good. If it does not, that is fine too. You do not need a map to understand what I'm saying. I'm going to tell you what the last year looked like from where I stood. I'm going to tell you what today looks like, right now, from my chair. I'm going to tell you what works and what gets people killed, at least around here. If you want hope, keep listening. If you want the truth, keep listening. If you want to know whether somebody else is still out there, keep listening. I am not alone in this building. Not fully. There are 6 of us, within shouting distance, and another dozen within a few miles. We are not a militia. We are not a church group. We are not anybody official anymore. We are people who stayed alive long enough to learn some rules and to stop pretending that a badge or a title protects anything. Right now, I have a window cracked because the generator exhaust can drift back in on still nights. I have a coat on because the heat here is a propane heater. We only light for an hour at a time, and the rest is blankets and moving around. The room smells faintly of oil, dust, and old carpet that got wet and never dried right. My mic is a cheap dynamic one I took from my old job. It is taped to a desk stand with black tape that has been reused too many times. If my voice cuts out, it is not because I'm trying to be dramatic. It is because something broke or somebody knocked something over. Before I start the year story, I'm going to do the thing that keeps me honest. Inventory, status, and what I can offer. I have a running generator in the parking lot, diesel, with a muffler extension made from scrap pipe. It runs quiet enough that you cannot hear it from the highway if the wind is right. I have 2 deep cycle batteries inside on a trickle charge, so I can keep talking for a little while, even if the generator stalls. I have a tank with about 40 gallons of diesel left. That is not a lot. That is a countdown. Food, we have beans, rice, canned vegetables, powdered drink mix, and enough salt to matter. No, I am not listing brands. I am not inviting strangers to come shopping. Water. We have a well pump. 2 buildings over, hand crank backup, medical. Basic first aid, antibiotics that are rationed, pain medicine that is rationed, and a lot of bandages made from torn sheets boiled in a pot. Weapons. A pump shotgun with 12-gauge shells, a 9mm pistol, and 1 rifle and 223. I am not telling you that to sound tough. I am telling you because you should know what kind of help this voice can and cannot back up. Now, 1 year ago, the first thing that most people got wrong was the timeline. Everybody wanted a clean line, a date, a moment where a normal day flipped into a nightmare. That is not what happened, not here. Here, it started with weird stories and then an hour where the phone never stopped ringing. It started with emergency rooms crowded for reasons nobody could explain fast enough. It started with a police scanner that sounded strained, then frantic, then dead. I remember the morning I stopped believing the official line. I was driving to the station, coffee in the cup holder, and I heard a dispatch call about a man biting a paramedic. Biting. I laughed out loud alone in my car because my brain filed it under drug and moved on. 10 minutes later, a second call. then a third. A supervisor's voice came over the channel telling units to wear face protection if they had it, not masks for a virus. Face protection because people were biting. That was the first time my hands got clumsy on the steering wheel. At the station, we did what we always did. We tried to make it make sense for listeners. We called the health department. We called the hospital public information line. We called the sheriff's office. Nobody had answers, and everybody wanted us to stop asking questions. That alone told me something. I have been in news long enough to know when a person is scared and pretending he is not. I heard it in their pauses. I heard it in their quick no comment, with no anger behind it, only fatigue. By noon, our parking lot had people in it who had never come to the station before. Not fans, not activists, just scared parents asking if we knew what was happening. One woman shook so hard she dropped her keys twice. A guy who worked at a grocery store told me the back room had turned into a fight. He kept saying, "It is not a riot," over and over, while he stared at the floor. That was the day normal language started failing people. That first night, the power flickered. Not a full outage, just enough to make the studio lights blink and the computers restart. You could tell the grid was stressed. That is the kind of detail people forget now, because everything since then has been bigger and louder. But that flicker mattered. It was the moment I realized nobody was going to keep the machine running for us. If the power went, everything we relied on went with it. Phones, water pumps, gas stations, card readers, all of it. 2 days in, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention names started showing up in official statements, and you could hear the careful wording. Aggressive behavior. Unknown pathogen. Avoid contact. It sounded professional. It also sounded late. People were already being hurt, not in big cinematic ways, in small, ugly ways. Somebody's aunt in a hallway, a neighbor in a driveway, a man at a bus stop who fell and then got surrounded. Here is the first premise I want to challenge, because I hear it even now when I catch scraps of other broadcasts. People say the dead came back. That framing makes it mystical. It makes it feel outside logic. What I saw was not magic. What I saw was infection, brain damage, and a body that stopped responding to pain and social cues. If you want to call that a zombie, fine. The label is useful. But do not let the label turn your brain off. Treat it as a disease that changes behavior, and you make better choices. The second premise, people think it spreads slow because movies trained everybody to expect a long buildup. Around here, it spread fast in clusters. One bad event would light up a whole block. One person would get hurt, then a family would try to help, then everybody would be in the same room breathing hard and touching the same surfaces and grabbing the same door handles. You get enough of that in a day, and suddenly your whole town feels different before you finish eating dinner. By the end of the first week, the station was getting calls that did not sound real. A woman crying because her husband locked himself in the bathroom and she could hear him scratching at the door. A man whispering from under his bed because his neighbor was on the porch making a wet chewing sound. I did not know what to say to those people. Nobody did. The only thing I could do was tell them to get away from windows, to lock interior doors, to keep shoes on, to keep a bag ready. Practical stuff, the kind of stuff you would tell a friend if you were standing in the same room. Then the calls stopped. Not because people got safe, because the network started failing. Cell towers do not run on hope. They run on power, maintenance, backhaul, and people paid to show up. When those people stop showing up, the towers stay on for a while, then they fall quiet in patches. You start getting dead zones where your phone says you have signal but nothing moves. People would stare at their screens and hit redial and blame themselves. That was another moment where normal instincts killed people. Folks waited for help that was never coming because a little icon still looked familiar. On day 9, our station got looted. Not a dramatic raid. A handful of desperate people saw a building with equipment and assumed it had supplies. They broke the side door and took anything that looked valuable. One of them grabbed my backpack from under my desk. That backpack had my spare charger, my pocket knife, a couple of protein bars, and a small first aid kit. That bag was my confidence. Losing it was the moment I stopped thinking of myself as a broadcaster and started thinking of myself as prey. I left that night. I did not announce it. I did not do a final sign-off. I shut down what I could, shoved gear into a plastic tote, and walked out the back while the city sirens howled in the distance. Those sirens were not an organized response. They were alarm systems stuck on repeat in buildings nobody could reach. A siren goes off long enough, people stop reacting to it. That is not bravery. That is exhaustion. I headed east out of town in an old sedan with half a tank of gas. I had no plan that would impress anybody. I had a short list of places with generators, and I had a brother who worked maintenance at a county building. I drove with my headlights off on empty roads. That is dangerous for normal reasons, but it kept attention off me. I learned in those first days that attention was a currency you did not want. I reached my brother's place near Columbia right after sunrise. He was not there, the door was open, the house was quiet in a way that did not feel abandoned. There was food on a plate, dried and crusted. There was a chair tipped over. No blood, no body. Just absence. That is another thing movies get wrong. You do not always get closure. Sometimes you get a room with the lights on and nobody in it. I stayed anyway, because I had no better option, and because leaving meant driving through unknown roads where anybody could be waiting. I put a chair under the door handle. I pulled the curtains. I kept my shoes on. I slept in fragments. When I did sleep, I had the kind of dreams that feel practical. Dreams where you forget a lock. Dreams where you cannot find your keys. Dreams where a person you love is in the next room and you cannot reach him because your legs will not move. By the end of that month, I had found 3 other survivors in the area. Not because I went looking for friends, because survival forces contact. You need water, you need tools, you need information. The first was a woman named Marisol Reyes, an emergency room nurse from University Hospital. She showed up at the edge of the neighborhood with a backpack and a kitchen knife taped to a broom handle because her hands were damaged from work and she could not trust her grip. She did not cry. She did not beg. She asked for water and a place to sit with her back to a wall. I respected that instantly. The second was an older man named Glenn Doherty, retired highway patrol. He did not have a uniform anymore. He had a radio scanner and a habit of speaking in short sentences. He told me one useful thing that saved my life later. Most people do not keep watch the way they think they do. They stare into the dark until their eyes get tired. Then they relax. An infected person does not relax. A hungry person does not relax. That is why ambush works. You have to fight your brain's desire to pretend nothing is coming. The third was a kid, 17, name of Owen Price. His voice had that edge where he was trying to sound older than he felt. He had a backpack full of batteries and a small solar panel scavenged from a yard light setup. He traded it for food and a place to sleep in the garage. He also brought gossip. Not internet gossip, real road gossip. He had walked part of Interstate 70 and seen cars jammed up for miles, doors open, luggage scattered, no bodies in most of them. That told me a lot. It told me people ran. It told me people fled fast. We held that house for 3 months. 3 months is a long time in a world like this. We did not hold it with hero moves. We held it with boring routines. We moved furniture to block sightlines from the street. We put blankets over windows instead of leaving shiny glass. We cooked at odd hours so smoke did not become a beacon. We kept trash inside until we could bury it. We learned to smell trouble before we saw it. Not supernatural. Just the human smell of exhaust and sweat and old cigarettes drifting in on wind. The infected, the ones everyone calls zombies, were a problem, but not the only one. After the first few weeks, most infected around neighborhoods had moved on or gone still, somewhere you did not want to find. The bigger threat became people who had decided rules were optional. People with trucks and guns and no patience. People who saw lights in a window and treated it as an invitation. That is why I stopped using candles. That is why I stopped talking loud indoors. That is why we stopped playing music. Silence was not peace. Silence was camouflage. Now I'm going to talk technical because it matters, and because I want you alive. Batteries do not last forever. Gasoline goes bad faster than you want to believe. Diesel lasts longer, but it still grows problems if water gets into it. Propane is gold but heavy. A generator is not a miracle. It is a machine with a small engine that hates you and waits for the moment you do not have spare oil. If you run a generator, run it on a schedule. Give it breaks. Keep it away from walls. Watch carbon monoxide. If you are listening indoors and you smell exhaust, you are already late. Food matters too, but not in the fantasy way. You do not need exotic survival meals. You need calories, and you need not to get sick. A stomach bug will take you out faster than most threats because it makes you weak and loud and desperate for clean water. We boiled everything. We washed hands with diluted bleach when soap ran out. We treated minor cuts as serious. Marisol kept repeating the same line until it became annoying, and then it became scripture. Infection starts with neglect. She meant bacteria. She also meant the other kind. I started broadcasting again in the 4th month, not because I wanted fame, but because information started acting scarce in a way that scared me. Glenn's scanner was mostly quiet. Owen's gossip dried up because he stopped roaming as far. We did not know what towns were still populated. We did not know what roads were blocked. We did not know whether there were safe places or only traps. So I built a small setup. I ran a wire antenna out to a tree. I powered the rig off a battery. I spoke into a mic and I hoped the sound reached somebody sane. At first, nobody answered. I talked anyway. I described where we were in broad terms. I warned about a bridge that was out. I warned about a pack of feral dogs near a strip mall. I gave practical advice about storing water and keeping noise down. That sounds selfless. It was not. It was insurance. The more people who stayed alive around us, the less likely we would be the last light on the block. Being the only light is a death sentence. The first response came from a man in Illinois, down near Springfield. His name was Curtis Hale. He sounded tired and sharp at the same time. He said he had a small group and a working well. He asked if we had medical help. Marisol took the mic for 2 minutes, told him how to treat a wound without a clinic, then handed it back. Curtis thanked her and then said something that stuck with me. Keep talking. It is the only thing that feels normal. He went silent after that, and I never heard him again. I still think about him. I still check that mental file for new data. No new data came. Month 6, we lost the house. Not to zombies. Not to fire. To humans with patience. A truck passed the neighborhood twice in one day. Slow, deliberate. Then the next night, we heard a tap at the back door. Tap, tap, tap. Not a knock, a signal. Glenn answered through the door with his pistol ready. No one spoke back. That was the point. Somebody was testing whether we would reveal ourselves. We did not open. We did not threaten. We waited. At 2 a.m, we heard glass break on the other side of the street, then yelling, then a gunshot, then silence. That was not random. That was a team working. Somebody drew attention. Somebody watched reactions. Somebody marked the houses that moved. That is when Glenn said, "Calm. We are leaving before sunrise. No debate, no vote. We packed in 10 minutes. That speed saved us." We drove out under cloud cover toward the county emergency management building I am in now. Glenn knew it had a generator hookup and a fuel tank. He knew it had radios. He also knew most people would avoid it because it looked official, and official places had been the first to get overrun early on. That worked in our favor. Fear makes people avoid useful places. Fear also makes people predictable. Getting in was not hard. The doors were locked but not reinforced. Glenn had keys from his old life that still opened a surprising number of public buildings. Inside, it was stale air and old paperwork. We cleared room by room with flashlights covered in tape so the beam stayed narrow. We found 2 bodies in a conference room, months old, no obvious wounds. Marisol did not touch them. She covered their faces with a sheet and we moved on. We did not have the emotional budget for funerals. That sounds cold. It is also true. We got the generator running after a day of work. Old diesel in the tank, water separator clogged, battery dead. Owen had spare batteries and a jump pack he had hoarded. Glenn had the patience to do mechanical steps in order. I had the wiring knowledge to route power where we needed it without burning the place down. Marisol kept us from doing the macho thing where you push through exhaustion and hurt yourself. That mix is why we are still here. Skill beats courage most days. We built routines again, watch shifts, quiet hours, scavenging routes, radio check-ins at set times. We learned a pattern. If you go out every day at the same hour, you get followed. If you never go out, you starve. So we went out irregular. We staged supplies closer so runs were shorter. We hid caches in mundane places inside a broken vending machine, under a loose ceiling tile, behind file cabinets. We learned to think in layers. If the building gets compromised, where do you go inside it? If inside fails, where do you go outside? If outside fails, where do you go beyond that? By month 9, I was broadcasting regularly. Not long shows, short practical blocks. I would speak for 10 minutes, then shut down to listen. If somebody called in, I kept it short. No drawn-out grief on air. Not because grief is shameful, because long talk invites attention. Every second you transmit, you announce that somebody alive is sitting somewhere with power. That is a beacon to anyone who wants what you have. I'm telling you all this because it leads into today, and today is the part you might be living too. A year in, the world is not one big fire. It is patches. Quiet towns, loud towns. Roads that are empty for weeks and then suddenly have a caravan. Places where infected roam in groups because sound draws them, and places where you barely see any because nothing moves to attract them. The danger is not constant screaming. The danger is the sudden shift from calm to chaos in under a minute. Today started calm. That is always a trap for your brain. The sky was clear in the morning. We did a water run at a nearby subdivision where rain barrels were still set up behind a few houses. We filled 2 containers, wiped them down, and got back without anyone seeing us. Glenn called that a free day. He said it as a joke, and then he spit to the side because even saying it felt wrong. At noon, Owen found fresh tire tracks near the access road. 2 sets. Heavy. Not the little sedan tracks you see from desperate folks. Truck tracks. The tread was sharp, not worn smooth. Whoever drove had not been stranded long. That mattered. Stranded people are unpredictable. Equipped people are organized. Organized people are either helpful or dangerous, and you do not find out which one by waving from your window. We did not panic. We did what we always do when a new variable shows up. We tightened our perimeter. We moved our visible gear away from windows. We killed the generator and went to battery power for a while. Silence. No lights. No movement near the glass. I stayed on mic because I had already committed to broadcasting this evening, and changing patterns too often also gets you killed. A person listening for you will notice when you go quiet. At around 6 in the evening, we heard distant engine noise. It came, it went, it came again. A truck circling. Glenn watched through binoculars from a stairwell window on the far side. He did not speak until he had something real to report. When he did, he said, 2 vehicles. Pickup and a sport utility. 4 people, armed. He did not add adjectives. He did not need to. Marisol asked one question, steady. Do they look sick? Glenn said no. That is an ugly question to ask, but it is the right one. Infected do not drive well. Infected do not coordinate. People do. Sick people sometimes do too, but you can spot the difference in movement, fast, jerky motion, wandering focus, bad balance. Glenn saw none of that. He saw patience. He saw discipline. That is worse in some ways. I started this broadcast anyway. That might sound stupid. Here is my reasoning, and I want you to test it, not just swallow it. If I stop broadcasting every time I get scared, I train myself to shut up when pressure comes. Silence isolates you. Isolation makes you sloppy. Broadcasting also lets me put a message out that might redirect trouble away from this building. If I say out loud that this area is thin and picked over, Maybe a group looking for easy supplies will move on. It is a gamble. Everything is a gamble now. So I talk. I keep my voice normal. I keep the volume low in the room. I speak into the mic and I watch the hallway at the same time. My rifle is leaning against the desk, safety on, magazine seated, chamber empty, because I do not trust myself to keep a live round in when my attention is split. Glenn taught me that. He said most accidental shots come from fatigue and complacency, not fear. He was right. If you're out there and you are traveling through central Missouri, avoid the stretch of Interstate 70 east of Kingdom City. There is a pileup at the overpass, and the shoulder has sunk where rain washed the base out. If you try to go around, you will end up in a ditch. Take farm roads south instead. Keep your speed down. Keep your windows up. If you have to stop, stop where you can see both directions for a long distance. Do not stop near tree lines. That advice sounds simple. It is not. Stopping is where people die. You stop because you need fuel, or you need to pee, or you need to check a map. You stop and your guard drops because your brain thinks you are in a new chapter. That is when a person steps out of a ditch with a gun. That is when an infected body you did not notice lifts its head and starts moving toward you. So if you take anything from this broadcast, take this. Treat stops as the most dangerous part of movement. Plan them. Keep them short. Keep someone watching. I was mid-sentence when the first rock hit the side of the building. Not a random thud. A deliberate throw. It was followed by a second, then a third. I stopped talking for a beat and listened. Glenn's voice came over my shoulder, low. They want us to react. Keep talking. Do not change tone. That is discipline. That is what you learn after a year of being hunted by reality. So I kept talking. I talked about water. I talked about boiling. I talked about the fact that most public wells are still usable if the pump is intact, but you have to assume contamination from runoff and from dead animals. I talked about how you can make a basic filter with cloth and charcoal, and how that filter does not make water safe unless you still boil it. I talked and I watched the door. The door handle jiggled once, just once, then stopped. That was not a scared person. That was a test. Glenn motioned with his hand. Owen moved away from the window line. Marisol went to the interior hall where we keep our medical kit. That might sound odd. She does it because if something goes bad, she wants bandages in reach, not in a panic scramble. Again, boring preparation beats dramatic courage. A voice called from outside, male, mid-30s maybe. Confident. We heard you. We want to talk. He did not shout. He did not plead. He spoke the way a person speaks when he believes he controls the next part. Glenn mouthed, no. Then he pointed to me and pointed at the mic. He wanted me to answer on air, not off air. That also sounds odd. Here is why. If I answer on air, anyone listening knows there are strangers outside and can avoid this area. Also, the strangers hear my voice steady, which tells them panic is not an easy lever. I said into the mic, if you are outside this building, move on. We do not trade with unknown groups at night. I did not threaten. I did not insult. I kept it flat. The outside voice laughed once, one short laugh. Then he said, you can trade or we can take. That is the moment where a lot of people get trapped by a bad assumption. The assumption is that if you comply a little, you buy safety. You do not. Not with people who open with that line. If a person starts with we can take, he already decided he can take. He is only offering trade because it costs less energy. Compliance does not make him respectful. Compliance makes him efficient. Glenn leaned close and whispered, keep him talking. I want eyes on the back. He moved down the hall. Owen followed. I stayed at the desk, mic live, my hands steady because I had a job to do. My job was to keep that man outside speaking because as long as he spoke, he was not silently moving. As long as he spoke, his group's plan might stay half visible. I said, you know this building does not have much. You heard my voice? You think I sound well fed? That was a risk. It was also true. The man outside answered, "You have power. You have fuel. You have batteries. You have food. Nobody talks this long without resources." He was not stupid. That is another premise I want to kill. Do not assume bad people are dumb. Bad people often survive because they are good at reading patterns. I heard a faint scrape behind the building, far side, a ladder or a boot on metal. I did not look toward it. I kept my face toward the mic. I said, "Power does not mean plenty. It means we are stubborn." The man outside said, "Stubborn gets you dead." Glenn's voice snapped once over the handheld radio we use inside. "Back door." 2 words, that was all. Owen's voice came right after, tight. "2 moving, 1 on the roof." Roof. That made my mouth go dry. Not fear talk, just reality. Roof means the antenna. Roof means the line I ran. Roof means the weakest part of a building because every building has access points up there nobody thinks about until it matters. I stopped the broadcast for a second. Not fully off, just muted. I said quietly, "If they get the roof, they cut the antenna, and we lose everything." Marisol nodded once. She was already moving toward the stairwell with a flashlight and a small bag. She is not a fighter. She is also not helpless. She has a way of moving that says she will do the ugly work if it keeps someone else alive. I unmuted. "Listen," I said into the mic. "If you are anywhere within 10 miles of a county building outside Columbia, stay away tonight. There is an armed group probing the area." I did not name the building. I did not give directions. But if you are close enough to matter, you already know the landmarks. That warning was my apology to strangers for the risk my broadcast creates. We moved. Glenn went to the back corridor with the shotgun. Owen went to the stairwell leading to the roof access, the rifle in his hands, shoulders tight. I stayed with the mic because somebody had to keep talking and because the desk position had sightlines into the hall. Marisol moved between them, not in the middle but behind cover, ready to patch whoever needed patching. The first shot came from outside, not at us. At a window, glass shattered in a side office. The sound carried far. That is the part that scares me even more than bullets. Glass means noise. Noise means infected can drift toward us without any human decision. A group that uses noise as a tool might not care if infected come, because infected are a weapon too. I kept talking on air. I described what was happening in plain terms. Shots fired, windows broken. Stay inside if you are near. I did not do it to be dramatic. I did it because if an infected group starts moving toward this building, anyone in the area deserves a chance to know before it reaches him. That is the only moral math I have left that still feels solid. Warn people. Let them decide. Owen called down from the stairwell, voice low but urgent. "Roof access panel is loose. Somebody opened it before." That meant this building had been used, maybe by scavengers, maybe by another group. That is the kind of detail that changes the fight. A locked door buys time. A door somebody already compromised is a liability. Glenn answered. "Hold that stare. Do not chase." Good rule, chasing gets you killed. Holding ground keeps your brain working. I heard footsteps above. Not heavy running. Careful steps. A person trying not to make noise. That meant training, or at least practice. Owen raised the rifle. He did not fire. He waited because firing through a roof hatch is a gamble and because he did not want muzzle flash to give away his exact position if there were more than one attacker. He looked at Glenn for a signal. Glenn was not there yet. Owen had to decide. That is another year-in lesson. You do not always have a leader. Sometimes you have a moment, and the moment wants an answer. Owen called, "Stop where you are. Back up." He did not shout. He sounded older than 17 for 2 seconds. A voice above him answered, calm, "Kid, you do not want this." Owen said, "Back up." The voice above moved forward anyway. Owen fired one shot into the ceiling just beside the hatch opening. Not to hit, to warn. Plaster dust fell. The voice above froze. That warning shot was smart and dangerous at the same time. Smart because it proved Owen meant business. Dangerous because gunshots are a dinner bell for infected within earshot. I could hear it already, faint from far off. That low, dragging shuffle sound outside mixed with the wind. Not a horde, a few. But a few is how it starts. The man outside yelled, "Enough of this, burn it." That was the line I was waiting for. If a group is willing to burn you out, that group is not here to trade. That group is here to erase you. Glenn's voice came from the hall, hard. "Daniel, kill the broadcast. Now." Here is where I push back on my own instinct. I wanted to keep talking. I wanted to keep being useful. Glenn was right. A live broadcast in the middle of an assault is a risk. It ties you to a chair. It keeps your hands busy. It makes you predictable. So I did the thing I hate. I stopped transmitting. I killed power to the rig, and I unplugged the mic. The room went quiet except for the building sounds and my own footsteps. We moved into the interior corridor, away from windows. Our plan was simple. If they came through the front, we would fall back to the file room with one entry and hold it. If they came through the back, we would use the side stairwell as an escape route into the drainage ditch behind the property. Not heroic, not clean, just survival geometry. Smoke smell hit fast. Not full fire, but something burning outside near the broken window. A Molotov. That tells you the attackers brought supplies and planning. Gasoline in a bottle. Cloth. Flame. That stuff is not hard to make, but it is a sign of intent. You do not throw fire unless you accept that you might burn the supplies you want. That means the supplies are not the main goal. The goal is control. We heard infected outside. Closer now. One moan, then another, then a thud against the building. Not coordinated. Not a human trick. Just bodies moving toward the loudest thing. The attackers had created a second problem for us and for themselves. That was the moment I realized their plan might have a flaw we could use. Humans can retreat. Infected do not. If we could hold inside long enough, the attackers might get pinned between the building and the infected gathering around their own noise. Glenn made a choice. He said, "We go quiet. Let the dead do work." He motioned us into the file room. We shut the door. We did not lock it. Locking it makes you feel safe, and then you forget it exists until you need it. Glenn wedged a chair under the knob, not a full barricade, just resistance. Owen sat on the floor with the rifle aimed at the door, breathing through his nose, jaw set. Marisol checked our pockets for anything that could rattle. She took my keys and wrapped them in cloth. That is the kind of detail that matters. A single metal jingle can give you away in a quiet building. We waited. Not long. Maybe 2 minutes. It felt longer. Outside, footsteps moved. A voice hissed something I could not hear, then a loud crash as something heavy hit the front door, then a second crash, then a third. The attackers were trying to force entry. The infected outside responded to that noise. More moans, more scraping, more impact sounds. The building became a drum. The front door finally gave. I heard the metal bar snap, then the thud of boots inside. 3 sets at least. They moved fast, confident. One of them kicked a trash can and cursed, loud. That told me something too. Discipline was cracking. The environment was pushing back. When people get annoyed, they get sloppy. Sloppy creates opportunities. Then we heard screaming outside. Not inside, outside. A human scream, short and shocked. Then gunfire, rapid. Not aim shots, panic shots. The attackers had pulled infected right into their own path. That was not luck. That was physics. Noise pulls bodies. Crowds form around sound. If you cannot control sound, you cannot control movement. Glenn whispered, "Now." He moved first, opening the file room door 1 inch, scanning the hall. Clear. He waved us out. We moved low, fast, controlled. Owen first, then Marisol, then me. We headed for the side stairwell, not the front. The front would be a mess. The side gave us a chance to slip out while the attackers dealt with infected at the entrance. At the bottom of the stairwell, Glenn stopped and listened. He put his ear near the door. Outside, I heard the wet slap of footsteps on pavement, the scrape of bodies dragging, the sound of somebody yelling, "Back up, back up." Then a gunshot close enough that the door vibrated. Glenn opened it a fraction and looked. He shut it again immediately. "Too hot," he whispered. "We go through the crawl." The crawl space access is a maintenance hatch behind an old water heater room. Most people do not think about it. We found it months ago and kept it clear because we believe in exits. Glenn pulled the hatch open. Cold air rose, damp and earthy. We climbed down one by one. It was tight. Dirt floor, pipes overhead. My shoulder scraped a nail and I bit my tongue to keep from making noise. Marisol touched my arm once, a silent check, then kept moving. We crawled toward the back of the building where the crawl space opens near a vent grate. We had loosened the screws earlier in the year so we could push it out if needed. Glenn pushed. The grate moved. Outside air rushed in. We waited. Listening. Outside chaos. Infected noises, human yelling, and at least one engine starting. The attackers were trying to leave while they still could. We slipped out into the drainage ditch, staying low. The grass was dead and sharp under my hands. The ditch smelled of mud and old leaves. We moved down it toward a culvert that runs under the access road. That culvert is our planned escape route, because it puts a concrete barrier between us and line of sight. We crawled through, elbows in cold water, the sound of gunfire fading behind us. On the far side, we stopped behind a stand of brush. Glenn peeked back toward the building. The parking lot was a mess. The front entrance had at least 5 infected clustered around it, slamming into the doorway, drawn by leftover noise and scent. One attacker was on the hood of a car, swinging something long, trying to keep them off. Another attacker fired into the crowd, which did not stop movement the way he wanted. The third attacker ran toward a truck with the door open. Glenn watched for 10 seconds, then said, "We leave the rig. We cannot go back." That hit hard because the rig was my identity. The transmitter, the mic, the cables, the batteries, all of it. But Glenn was right. Going back meant fighting both infected and armed humans, in open space, in low light, with no cover. That is not bravery. That is suicide. Marisol said, "We can build another." She did not sound comforting. She sounded factual. That helped. Owen swallowed and nodded. He was shaking in his hands, not sobbing, not breaking, just adrenaline. Drain. He kept the rifle up anyway. That is a kid doing adult work because he has no choice. We moved east through backlots and tree lines, heading toward a second stash site we keep in an abandoned maintenance shed near a county park. Not a fancy plan, just a place with cached water, a tarp, and a spare battery. We walked in silence, stepping around branches instead of on them, keeping off gravel. Infected react to sound. Humans react to patterns. If you look like you are heading somewhere specific, somebody might follow. We moved irregular, changed direction twice, then cut across a ditch and doubled back. Glenn calls it messing up the story. If someone is watching, the watcher wants a clean narrative. Do not give him one. At the shed, we found the lock, still intact. Good sign. We opened it, slipped inside, shut it behind us. The air smelled like mouse droppings and old fertilizer. Owen sat down hard. Marisol checked his hands for cuts. Glenn checked the door. I checked the stash. Everything was there. Water. A small solar panel. A battery pack. 2 cans of food. A roll of tape. A bundle of wire. Not enough to live forever. Enough to restart. This is where the broadcast resumes in my head, because I know some of you were listening and then the signal cut and you were left with silence. Silence is brutal. Silence makes you imagine the worst. So I'm going to finish what I started, because that is the only way I know how to keep moving. We stayed in that shed until dawn. No sleep, not real sleep, just sitting with our backs to walls, drinking small sips of water, listening for footsteps. We heard none close. We heard infected far off a few times. We heard an engine on the highway once. That was it. When the sun came up, gray and cold, we walked back toward the county building from a different angle to see what was left. From a ridge behind a line of trees, we saw smoke. The building had fire damage near the front entrance, not fully burned down, just blackened. The parking lot was littered with broken glass and scattered papers. No vehicles stayed. The attackers were gone. Infected still moved around the entryway, slow, bumping into each other, drawn to nothing now except leftover scent. The antenna on the roof was bent. The cable line was hanging loose. Our generator was gone. 40 gallons of diesel gone. A year of work. Gone in one night. If you think that means the story ends, you have not lived a year in this world. Things end. You do not. Not unless you decide to stop. So we backed away without taking any shots. We did not clear the building. We did not go in for revenge. Revenge is expensive. We left it. We walked. We became ghosts again. That is the part people hate hearing. A year in, hero fantasies get stripped. You do not win fights. You survive them. You do not hold territory because you planted a flag. You hold territory because it is not worth taking from you, and the moment it becomes worth taking, someone tries. That is not cynicism. That is logistics and human nature under pressure. Now I'm going to give you the practical part, because I promised. If you are trying to broadcast, do not anchor your whole life to one site. Have a second site. Have a third. Cache wire and connectors in more than one place. Keep a battery pack wrapped in plastic somewhere dry. Keep a notebook with your wiring plan in code, not plain words. If someone finds it, make it confusing. A year in, people loot paperwork for information, not just for fire starting. If you're traveling, stop thinking in days and start thinking in hours. How many hours of light do you have? How many hours until you need water? How many hours until you cannot safely find shelter? That mental shift changes everything. People who think in days make sloppy late choices. People who think in hours pack earlier, move earlier, and avoid the dangerous twilight decisions. If you meet strangers, ask questions that reveal behavior, not stories. Ask what they did yesterday. Ask what they ate. Ask where they slept. A liar can invent a backstory. A liar struggles to keep yesterday consistent. Watch hands. Watch eyes. Watch whether the person respects your space without being told. A person who steps closer when you step back is testing you. That test does not lead anywhere good. About the infected, I will keep it short. Do not assume they are stupid. Do not assume they are blind. Assume they react strongest to sound and motion. Assume they cluster. Assume a single infected is rarely truly alone because noise carries. If you have to fight, do it quiet. If you cannot do it quiet, do it fast and leave. Staying near the scene is how you get surrounded. You might be wondering why I'm telling you all this if my own setup got knocked out. Here is the truth. I am talking again because we rebuilt a smaller rig in the shed. Owen had spare wire. I had a backup handheld transmitter wrapped in plastic that I forgot about until today. Glenn climbed a water tower ladder this afternoon, ran a wire to a maintenance bracket, and came down with his hands bleeding through his gloves because Russ does not care about your plans. Marisol cleaned his hands and told him he is an idiot. Glenn nodded because he knows. We are broadcasting from a place I will not name. Not because I do not trust you, because you might get captured and then your knowledge becomes someone else's tool. That is not paranoia. That is how people work when they are hungry. Information has value. Treat your knowledge as a resource. Share enough to help. Keep enough to survive. 1 year into this, I have learned something about my own brain that I wish I could unlearn. I have learned how easy it is to reduce people into categories. Safe, unsafe, useful, useless. That is a coping skill. It also turns you into a person you might not like if you had a mirror. I fight that. I do not always win. If you are listening, fight it too. Stay sharp without becoming cruel. Cruelty feels efficient in the moment. Cruelty also creates enemies, and enemies do not have to be strong to ruin your life. I also want to challenge one more premise that shows up deep in survivor chatter. People say communities fail because people are selfish. That is half true. Communities also fail because people are exhausted and scared and making decisions with broken information. A mother stealing antibiotics is not a villain. A man hoarding fuel might be scared of dying alone. You can condemn that behavior if you want, but if you do not understand the fear underneath it, you will not predict it, and prediction is safety. I am not telling you to trust everyone. Do not. Trust is expensive. I'm telling you to watch patterns and motives, not just labels. A person in dirty clothes might be honest. A person with clean gear might be dangerous. A person offering help might be setting a hook. A person refusing to help might be preserving the last thread of stability in his own family. The world is not fair. It is just cause and effect. Here is where we are now, tonight. We are cold. We are alive. We have lost a lot of gear and gained a little wisdom from it, which is a trade I never asked for. The armed group that hit our building is out there somewhere. Maybe it moved on. Maybe it is still hunting. The infected around that building will keep clustering until noise fades and weather shifts. That area is now a hazard zone. If you are near Columbia, Missouri, stay away from county facilities near the edge of town. Move around. Use tree lines. Do not take the direct route just because it is familiar. Familiar routes are how predators find prey. If you are further away, here is the broader picture from what we have heard over the last month. Kansas City has pockets of survivors near industrial areas, especially near places with rail yards and warehouses. That also means raiders. St. Louis has heavy infected concentration downtown and along the riverfront, mostly because sound and people drew everything there early and it never drained. Smaller towns along Interstate 44 are unpredictable. Some are empty. Some have small groups with roadblocks. Do not assume a roadblock means safety. A roadblock can be a trap. Approach slow, approach ready to turn around. We heard one consistent bright spot from down near northern Arkansas around the Ozark foothills. A group there has working gardens and a clinic run by a former veterinarian and a former pharmacy tech. That is secondhand information. Do not bet your life on it. If you are nearby, move careful. Make contact from distance. Do not walk into a gate because you feel hopeful. Hope is not a credential. If you are somewhere with winter, plan now. I do not care if it is still warm today. If you wait until cold snaps, you will be scavenging with numb hands in short daylight. Gather blankets, gather fuel. Gather candles, but shield the light. Gather ways to heat water. If you can get a wood stove, do it, but vent it right and keep smoke low. Smoke attracts humans more than infected. Humans follow smoke because smoke means food. Now I'm going to say something personal because a year changes what you can carry. I do not know if my brother is alive. I do not know if my parents are alive. I used to check on them by phone and feel guilty when I did not call. Now I replay my last normal call with my mother in my head sometimes. Not in a sentimental way, in a factual way. What did she say? Where did she say she was going? Did she mention neighbors? Did she mention supplies? I run it like evidence because memory is all I have left of most people. That is what a year does. Marisol told me once, after we left the house, that grief is not only sadness. Grief is the constant mental labor of updating your life story without new information. That is a clean description. No poetry. Just truth. If you feel scattered, if you feel angry for no reason, if you feel numb and then suddenly sharp, that is not you turning into a monster. That is your brain trying to keep you functional while it carries a load it did not evolve for. Owen asked me yesterday why I keep talking. He asked it straight. No attitude. He said, "Why do you keep doing this when it gets us noticed?" That is a fair challenge. He is not wrong about the risk. I told him the truth. I said, because the silence makes people do stupid things. I also said, because someday, when this gets better, somebody will want a record that is not a government memo or a rumor, a human record. Owen nodded. Then he said, Okay, but if we get chased again, I am blaming you. That is a teenager answer. It made me almost laugh. Almost. Glenn does not say much about why he stays. He has a quiet sadness that feels older than the outbreak. He told me one night while cleaning the shotgun, I spent my life telling people what to do. I want to spend what is left doing one thing right. Then he went back to cleaning. That is Glenn. No speech, just a line that explains a lot. After he said that, he set the shotgun down on the table and started checking shells one by one. He did not do it because he needed to. He did it because the motion kept his hands steady and his mind in one place. I watched him work the way I used to watch my dad fix a mower blade. Slow, methodical, no wasted moves. I was on the other side of the room, retaping a connector that kept slipping on the cokes. Owen held the flashlight under his chin, trying to be useful without getting in the way. Marisol sat on a crate with her med bag open, sorting what she could salvage after the county building got hit. She had a way of counting things that felt brutal. 2 rolls of gauze, 1 nearly full bottle of iodine, half a box of gloves. "This is what we have," she said, and nobody argued. Outside, the night was quiet, in the way that makes you check the door twice. No wind, no distant engines, no random gunshots, just bugs, and the slow settling noises of the shed around us. Quiet can be a gift. Quiet can also be someone waiting with patience. We talked through our options, but we did it in the short bursts. Glenn did not want a long planning session. Long planning sessions create denial. He wanted a plan that fit in one breath. He said, "We stay here until morning. We confirm the county building is burned out. We pull anything safe if we can, then we relocate north. We do not broadcast from the same place twice." Owen looked at me because he knew what that meant. It meant I was going to lose my radio spot again. I nodded once. I did not argue. I had already argued in my head and lost. I got back on the air for a few minutes before we cut power for the night. Not a full show, just a warning and a status check. I said we had been forced out, that anyone near the county building should avoid it, that armed strangers were moving through the area. I kept my words plain. I did not say raiders. That word makes people imagine a movie and get stupid. I said armed group. After that, we went dark. We sat in the shed with our backs against the walls, and we rotated watch shifts. Glenn took first shift. He liked first shift because it gave him the cleanest read on the night. Owen took second. I took third. Marisol took fourth, but she barely slept between. She never fully trusts anyone else to catch every sound. At around 3 a.m, I heard the first real problem. A low rumble of engines. Not close, but moving on a road that carried sound. Then a second sound, more faint. Metal on metal. A trailer hitch, clanking. Maybe. A convoy, small. That meant the group that hit us did not just grab supplies and vanish. It meant he had friends. I tapped Glenn's boot twice. He opened his eyes instantly, no confusion. I whispered, "Engines west." He crawled to the shed door and looked through a crack we keep for exactly this. He watched for a full minute, then leaned back and said, "No lights. Smart." We did not move. Movement makes noise. Movement makes silhouettes. We waited it out. The engine sounds passed and then faded. That should have been the end of it. It was not. 2 minutes later, we heard a different sound. Slow. Footsteps and brush. A person moving careful. Glenn's hand went up, palm open. Freeze. Owen was already awake, rifle in his lap. Marisol had her knife out, not because she planned to fight with it, but because it gave her something to do besides shake. I stayed low and kept my breathing through my nose. Quiet is a skill you learn late, because nobody teaches it in normal life. The footsteps stopped outside the shed. A shadow moved across the thin gap at the bottom of the door. Somebody paused there, listening. We could hear his jacket fabric shift, the faint scrape of a boot toe, then a whisper. so low I almost thought I imagined it. A man's voice saying, "He is here." Glenn's eyes met mine. No surprise, just confirmation. They tracked the broadcast. They were close enough to hear the first transmission and smart enough to work outward from there. I felt a clean anger hit me. Not wild, just sharp. Not at them, at myself. I had given away our existence again. Glenn leaned in and whispered, "No shots unless forced." He pointed at the back wall. "There is a weak panel there that leads into a thicket if you push hard. We built it that way. It is ugly carpentry, but it works." The shed door handle lifted slowly. It did not yank. It tested. Glenn raised the shotgun and aimed at the hinge side, not the center. He was ready to disable the door without firing into the open. That is the kind of thinking that keeps you alive. Firing into open space is for movies. We needed control. The door did not open. The handle dropped. Then I heard something scratch against the wall near the lock. A tool. Maybe a flathead screwdriver. I could picture the man outside crouched there, working slow, listening between moves. He was not panicking. He was not desperate. He was hunting. Owen's mouth was slightly open. I could see him trying to hold still. I reached over and pressed 2 fingers against his wrist, a silent reminder to keep his hand steady. He nodded without looking at me. The lock clicked once, not open, but shifted. Marisol's eyes went hard. She was not scared in a normal way. She was calculating where her body could go if the door swung in. Glenn did not wait for the lock to fully fail. He moved with one clean decision. He stepped forward and slammed his shoulder into the door from the inside, hard, right where the man outside was crouched. It knocked the tool away. It also knocked the man off balance. We heard him grunt and stumble back. Glenn used that half second to whisper, "Now?" He shoved the weak back panel out with both hands. The thin plywood popped free and fell into the brush. Cold air rushed in. We crawled out one at a time, staying low, pushing through wet leaves and dead branches. Owen went first because he had the rifle. Marisol went next. I followed, dragging the small battery pack in a cloth bag. Glenn came last, backing out with the shotgun pointed at the hole. The man outside shouted loud now, "Back here!" Footsteps hit the ground hard. Another voice answered closer than I wanted. "Get him!" We moved through the trees, not running at full speed because running makes you loud and blind. Glenn kept us at a fast crouch walk. He guided us toward the drainage ditch that ran along the park boundary. I kept the bag tight against my chest so it would not bounce. Owen's boot slipped once in mud, and he caught himself without a curse. That kid was learning discipline the hard way. A shot cracked behind us. Not aimed well. It hit a tree trunk and splintered bark. That told me the shooter was firing at sound, not sight. He did not have a clean target. That meant we still had a chance. Then we heard the worst sound in a situation like this. A third voice, far off, yelling something that made the whole thing bigger. "Light it up!" A flashlight beam swept through the woods, bouncing. Then another. White cones of light moving in a pattern. They had more people. They were spreading out. Glenn's hand flicked, 2 fingers pointing left. "Ditch," he mouthed. We dropped into it and moved along the bottom, hunched. The ditch smelled of stagnant water and rotting leaves. It also hit us from the beams unless someone looked straight down. We made it to the culvert and went through, crawling on our hands and knees. Water soaked my sleeves. The bag stayed dry because I had wrapped it in plastic earlier, out of habit. That habit paid for itself right then. On the far side, Glenn paused and listened. The flashlight beams were still scanning, but farther now. The hunters did not rush the culvert. They did not even know we used it. That was good. It also meant they were patient. Patient hunters keep working the area until dawn. We kept moving, staying off the road, cutting toward an industrial stretch near the edge of town where there were storage buildings and a small concrete plant. Not because it was safe, because it was hard to watch every angle there. Too many corners, too many piles. A place with clutter gives you options if you know how to move. Around 5 in the morning, we heard sirens. Real sirens, not stuck alarms. A distant wail that rose and fell in a controlled way. It took my brain a second to accept it. Glenn's eyes narrowed. Owen whispered, "Who has sirens?" Marisol said low, "Nobody good." She was right. Good people do not waste fuel running sirens. Sirens are intimidation. Sirens are bait. Sirens are a way to push infected towards someone else. We saw the source from behind a wall of stacked pallets, a fire engine, older model, red paint dull under dust. It rolled slow along the frontage road with the siren on, pushing sound into every side street. Behind it, a pickup truck. 2 men in the pickup bed, standing, scanning with rifles. They were using the engine as a moving shield and a noise tool. Glenn leaned in and whispered, "That is the same group." He was reading behavior, not faces. Same pattern, force, control, draw infected, loot the aftermath. We did not engage. We stayed hidden and let them pass. When the siren faded, the world felt quieter than before. But that quiet was fake now. The siren would have stirred every infected within earshot. Those infected would drift toward the sound path and then spread outward, confused, hungry, bumping into anything that moved. The group had turned the whole area into a slow-moving hazard. That was catastrophe number 1 for the day, not a single explosion. Not a building collapse, a choice made by armed men that reshaped the map for everyone else. We moved north, staying parallel to the road but not on it. We passed a subdivision where 3 houses were on fire, not fully engulfed, just smoldering through attic spaces. No fire department, no water pressure. Fire in a neighborhood does not stop at one house anymore. It crawls. It spreads through fences, through dry leaves, through wind. We could smell it stronger as the sun came up. Smoke stung the back of my throat. We had cloth masks, but those only help so much. Glenn made the call to detour east toward farmland. "Smoke hides us," he said, then corrected himself. "Smoke covers us. It also kills. We do not stay under it." Out on the edge of a cornfield, we found a dead deer in a ditch, belly swollen, flies already working it. Marisol stopped and looked at it longer than I expected. She said water is bad nearby. She was thinking runoff, contamination, the way death leaks into everything. She marked the spot mentally. We all did. Around 8 in the morning, we heard a new kind of noise, helicopter noise far away. Not close enough to see. Just the thump carried on clear air. Owen's face lit up for half a second before he caught himself. Glenn shook his head once. "Do not chase that," he said. "If it lands where it wants. If it is flying, it is not looking for you." I wanted to argue. My old brain wanted rescue. My new brain knew Glenn was right. Chasing helicopters gets people exposed in open fields. Open fields are where you get spotted. We reached an abandoned road maintenance yard near Mexico, Missouri by late morning. Chain link fence, heavy equipment, a couple of salt sheds, a fuel tank that looked dry. The place had been looted hard months ago, still useful. A yard has height, sight lines, and solid structures. We could rest there and assess. We slipped in through a gap where the fence had been cut. We did not use the gate. Gates are watched. Glenn walked the perimeter, checking for fresh footprints. Owen climbed onto a loader bucket and scanned the horizon. Marisol sat under the shade of a salt shed and drank water in small sips, watching all of us in the way a nurse watches a room. I set the battery pack down and checked it. Still good, not full, but good. I could broadcast again for short bursts if we decided it was worth it. I did not even mention it yet because the decision was not mine alone anymore. We heard movement on the other side of the yard about 10 minutes later. Not infected. Humans. 2 voices. A woman and a man, arguing quietly. Then a child crying. That child cry hit me harder than any gunshot. Gunshots are expected now. A child crying means people are still trying to drag normal life through broken glass. Glenn signaled us down behind a stack of traffic barrels. He whispered, "We do not rush." He watched. He waited. The voices came closer. Then a small groupie entered through a gap in the fence, not the one we used. 4 people. A woman in her 30s, a man maybe 45, a boy around 10, a teenage girl. They carried bags and looked exhausted. The man had a handgun in his waistband. The woman had a kitchen knife. The teenage girl had a hammer. The boy carried nothing, just stayed close to the woman's hip. They were not hunting. They were fleeing. Their eyes kept snapping back toward the road. Marisol's face changed. She did not soften. She focused. She whispered, "He is dehydrated." She meant the boy. She could see it in his lips and his posture. This is where the real decisions get ugly. If we made contact, we risked drawing attention, risking betrayal, risking wasting supplies. If we stayed silent, we watched a kid fall apart in front of us, and we lived with that. Glenn looked at Owen, then at me, then at Marisol. He was doing a quick vote without words. I gave a small nod. Owen hesitated, then nodded too. Marisol did not nod. She just started moving her med bag zipper closed and stood up. That was her answer. Glenn stepped out first with empty hands visible, shotgun slung but not pointed. He said calm, "You are in a yard with other people. Do not run. Do not yell. We are not here to take your stuff." The man jerked, hand going toward his waistband. The teenage girl raised the hammer. The woman pulled the boy behind her. Glenn kept his voice steady. "I am Glenn. We are tired too. We can share water." Short stop. Then you move on. Then we move on. The man swallowed and said, "We are not going back." He sounded like he had been repeating that sentence for hours. Glenn said, "Where did you come from?" The woman answered, "Moberly. We heard sirens, then fires. Then people shooting from a truck." She looked at me and added, "We heard a voice on the radio last night. That was you." My stomach dropped. Not fear, not a physical description, just a fact in my head. The hunters were not the only ones tracking signal. Regular people were too. That is the double-edged part. Your broadcast can save. Your broadcast can also lead. I said, "Yes, I am Daniel. We are moving. You should move too." The woman's eyes filled, but she blinked hard and kept it together. "Thank you," she said. "It made my kids stop asking if the world ended." Marisol handed the boy a small bottle cap full of water. Not the whole bottle. She said, "Sip. Do not chug." The boy obeyed. That told me the mother had kept structure in his life even now. That kind of parenting is rare under pressure. The man introduced himself as Travis Nolan. The woman was Sherry Nolan. The teenage girl was Lacey. The boy was Ben. Sherry said they had been staying in a church basement with another family until a group with guns rolled in and demanded food. "They said it was a tax," she said. "Then someone started a fire on the block. We ran." Glenn's jaw tightened. He asked one direct question. "How many in the armed group?" Travis said, "I saw 8, maybe more. 2 trucks, 1 fire engine." Glenn nodded once. Confirmation. Same group. Bigger than we hoped. Owen asked, "Did they follow you?" Lacey answered, "No, we moved through backyards. We hid when we heard engines." She was sharp. She was paying attention. That mattered. We did not adopt them. We did not invite them into our plan. We also did not send them away empty. Glenn offered them a simple trade. 2 bottles of water and 1 can of food for information. Not because we wanted to profit. Because trade preserves dignity and reduces the chance of someone feeling owed in a way that turns into resentment. Glenn understood human psychology in a practical way. Sherry accepted. She did not haggle. She asked one thing in return. "If you broadcast again, can you say to avoid Highway 63 northbound?" Glenn looked at her. "Why?" Travis answered, "Bridge is damaged. A truck went through the guardrail. It is half hanging. People are trying to drive around in the ditch. It is turning into a trap." That piece of information saved lives if it got out. It also made broadcasting more urgent. I looked at Glenn. He looked back. He said, "Short burst, then we move." I set up fast behind the salt shed, using the shed's metal frame as cover and as a way to hide movement from the road. I ran a quick wire antenna up along a fence post. Nothing fancy, just enough. Owen kept watch. Glenn watched the entrance. Marisol stayed with Sherry and the kids, not bonding, just stabilizing. I keyed up and spoke plain. If you're traveling near Mexico, Missouri, avoid Highway 63 northbound. Bridge damage, vehicles stuck, people getting trapped. Also, there is an armed group using a fire engine with siren in the area. If you hear sirens, do not follow. Move away and stay out of sight. I cut off immediately after. No extra talk. No stories. Just data. That is how you survive longer with a transmitter. The moment I stopped, Owen hissed. "Movement," he pointed. A line of infected had emerged from behind a row of trees along the road, maybe drawn by earlier sirens, maybe drawn by the fires. 6 at first, then more behind them. They were not sprinting. They were moving with purpose, heads tilted, drifting toward the yard because the yard held voices and metal echoes. Travis grabbed Ben, instinct taking over. Sherry grabbed Lacey's arm. Glenn said, "No running. We move out the back and keep distance." He pointed toward a gap in the fence opposite the road. This is where catastrophe number 2 arrived. Not the infected. The sound. A loud crash on the road as the fire engine reappeared around a bend. Siren off now, moving fast. Behind it, 2 pickups. The armed group had looped back. Maybe they heard my burst. Maybe they were sweeping. Either way, they were now on a collision course with the infected stream that was drifting toward the yard. Glenn whispered, "They will push the dead at us." He was right. A vehicle can herd infected the way a person can herd cattle, not because infected obey, but because infected follow sound and movement. If the fire engine rolled toward the yard and revved, infected would drift after it and spill into our space. We did not have time to debate. Glenn made the call. "Split," he said. Daniel and Owen left. Marisol with the family right. "I will delay." Marisol started to protest. Glenn cut her off. "No, go." That decision was realistic and brutal. Splitting reduces the chance all of you get caught together. It also increases the chance someone dies alone. Glenn accepted that risk without drama because he had already decided what one thing right meant. I moved with Owen through the left gap, staying low behind equipment. We hopped a shallow ditch and cut into a line of trees. Owen kept looking back, fighting the urge to stop. I kept my hand on his shoulder once, then dropped it. He did not need comfort. He needed direction. "North," I whispered. "We meet at the drainage culvert by noon." Glenn had set that rally point earlier. We live by rally points now. Behind us, the yard erupted into noise. Not gunfire yet, engines shouting. The infected responded immediately. Their moans rose into a messy chorus. I heard a loud metallic clang as something heavy got shoved. Then the pop of a gunshot. Then 2 more. The armed group was firing into infected, but the shots also pulled more infected from farther out. That is how people turn a small problem into a flood. Owen and I pushed through the tree line and came out near a drainage basin with tall grass. We moved through it slow, keeping our heads low. We heard the siren turn on again. They were using it to drive the infected. I wanted to scream from frustration, but screaming is how you die, so I kept my mouth shut and kept walking. At 10 in the morning, rain started. Not a gentle drizzle, hard rain. The kind that turns dirt into slick mud and makes every leaf slap loud. Rain is a mixed blessing. It covers scent. It covers sound. It also slows you and makes hypothermia a real threat if you cannot get dry. We did not have spare dry clothes anymore. The county building stash was gone. This rain hit at the worst time. We found an abandoned culvert under a farm road and ducked in for a minute to reassess. Owen's hands were shaking from cold and adrenaline drain. He kept his grip anyway. He said, "We left Glenn." I said, "Glenn chose it." That was the truth. I was not going to lie to a kid who had seen enough to spot lies. We moved again. The rain eased after half an hour. The sound of engines had faded behind us. That could mean the armed group moved on. That could mean Glenn did not make it. That could mean Marisol and the family got pinned. All three possibilities sat in my head at once. At noon, we reached the rally point, a concrete culvert under a county road with a patch of scrub on one side. Owen and I waited under the bridge deck for cover. We did not sit. Sitting makes you settle. We stayed standing, shifting weight, scanning. At 12:30, we heard footsteps in wet grass. Owen raised the rifle. I whispered, "Hold." Marisol emerged first, hair plastered to her forehead, face streaked with dirt. Behind her came Sherry and Ben, then Travis and Lacey. They were alive. That was relief. Then Glenn stepped out last, limping, shotgun still in hand. His sleeve was torn, and his forearm had a shallow cut, not deep, but bleeding through the fabric. Marisol moved on him immediately. "Sit," she said. Glenn sat without argument. She cleaned the cut with water, then iodine, then wrapped it tight. Glenn looked at me while she worked and said, "Quiet." We did not get followed. Travis said he saved us. Glenn did not respond to that. He did not want credit. He also did not want people getting attached to him in a way that made decisions harder later. Attachment is another currency now, and it can bankrupt you. We regrouped under the bridge deck out of sight. Glenn gave a quick report. They used the siren to pull dead toward the yard. Then they got swarmed. One of their trucks got stuck on a concrete barrier. I heard yelling. I saw 2 of them go down. I did not confirm kills. I do not waste time confirming. He looked at Owen. "You hear that? No confirming." Owen nodded. That lesson was going into him deep. Sherry asked, "Are they still out there?" Glenn said, "Yes, fewer, angry. They will blame someone." He did not say who. We all knew. Anyone with a broadcast voice becomes a target. We had a new problem now, too. The Nolan family had no safe place to go. If we sent them off alone, they might die within a day. If we took them with us, we doubled our noise and footprint. Also, kids mean you cannot move as fast. Kids mean you cannot take some risks. That can be a good constraint. It can also get you killed. Glenn did the thing he does. He made it concrete. We can travel together for one day. We share watch. We share water. Tomorrow morning we decide whether we split. Nobody cries about it. Nobody guilt trips. Sherry's face tightened, but she nodded. Travis nodded too. Lacey looked relieved and insulted at the same time, because she wanted to be treated as capable. Glenn treated her as capable by giving her truth. We moved north again, aiming for a small rural water treatment outbuilding Glenn knew about near a creek. Not a plant with big tanks and alarms, just a small pump station with a fenced area and a concrete building. Those places sometimes have backup power hookups, sometimes have tools, and often get ignored because they do not look valuable. Useful and boring is the goal. On the way, we passed a gas station that had burned down to its frame. The canopy had collapsed, and the asphalt was stained. That burn was old, but the smell still lingered. It reminded me that fire does not need infected to spread. It needs people being careless. We also passed a line of cars in a ditch, 3 of them, doors open. No bodies visible. That told me people bailed out and ran. Where did they run? Into the woods, into fields, into houses. Every abandoned car is a question mark that can turn to a threat later. At around 4 in the afternoon, we heard distant thunder again. Weather was moving in. Missouri weather does not care about apocalypse. Storms still roll, trees still drop, lightning still starts fires. If you are counting on shelter, you count on it extra hard during storms because storms force people into cover, and cover brings contact. We reached the pump station near dusk. The fence was intact. The gate was locked. Glenn cut the lock with bolt cutters he had kept since his patrol days. He saved those cutters for a year, and here they paid off. We slipped inside and shut the gate behind us. Not because it would stop a determined group, but because it slowed a casual wanderer. The concrete building had a metal door. Glenn checked it, locked. He listened. No movement inside. Owen and Lacey watched the tree line while Glenn worked the latch with a pry bar. The door opened with a groan that made Ben flinch. Sherry put her hand on his shoulder and whispered something I could not hear. He calmed down. That was good parenting again. Keep kids regulated. Regulated kids survive. Inside, the building smelled clean compared to everything else. Concrete, metal, and chlorine residue. There were shelves with spare parts, a coil of wire, a box of fuses. No miracle stockpile, but useful. Marisol found a small first aid kit with expired stuff and still took it. Because expired is better than nothing if you know what you are doing. Then catastrophe number 3 hit, and it was not human. The storm arrived fast. Wind slammed into the building, rattling the door. Rain hammered the roof. A crack of thunder hit so close it made the air feel tight. The lights did not flicker because there were no lights to flicker. Only the sound of weather trying to tear the world apart. Ben started to cry. Not loud, just a little broken sound. Sherry held him close and rocked him slightly. Marisol took out a bottle of drink mix and poured a tiny amount into Ben's water. A small kindness. Ben sipped and settled. That small act mattered. It was a reminder that not everything is tactics. Some of it is keeping people human enough to keep going. Over the storm noise, we heard something else. A deep horn sound far off, then another. Not a car horn, a train horn. That meant rail was still moving somewhere. Or someone was using a locomotive horn as a signal. Either option was big. If rail was moving, some organized group existed with fuel and manpower. If it was a signal, it meant humans were coordinating over distance. Both were dangerous and promising at the same time. Glenn looked at me and said, "No chasing trains." I almost laughed, but I kept my mouth shut. He was right. Chasing unknown signals is how you end up dead in a ditch. When the storm eased around 9 at night, we did a perimeter check from inside the fence. The world smelled fresh and wet. The rain had knocked ash down from the sky. It also had washed scent trails away. That was a reset. Resets are rare now. We took it. We set a watch rotation. Owen and Lacey took first together because 2 young people on watch keep each other awake better than one. Glenn took second. Travis took third. I took fourth. Marisol refused fifth because she said, "I'm going to sleep now, or I will make a mistake tomorrow." She slept. That was a professional decision. On my watch, around 2 in the morning, I heard a vehicle approach on the road. Slow, no lights, tires on wet gravel. It stopped near the fence, maybe 30 yards away. A door opened. A man's voice said low, "I know you are in there." I did not move toward the door. I did not answer right away. I woke Glenn with a light touch on his boot. Then I woke Owen with another. Glenn slid up beside me and listened. The man outside spoke again. "Radio man, you cost me people today." It was him. The leader, or someone close to him. The armed group did not disappear. He traced us again. Not by magic, by patience and logic. He saw our path. He found our rally point. He looked for fence lines and small utility buildings. He knew the area too. Glenn whispered, "Do not answer." The man outside kept talking anyway. "You can come out and we can end it quick. Or I can wait until morning and burn you out." He was calm. He was enjoying control. I felt Owen's body tense beside me. He wanted to shoot through the wall. That urge is normal. It is also reckless. You shoot blind. You waste ammo. You reveal position. You might hit nobody. And you invite return fire. Glenn held up a hand, steady. Marisol woke up to the voices. She moved silently behind us, medbag already on her shoulder. Travis and Sherry woke too. Lacey's eyes were wide, but she stayed quiet. Ben stayed asleep. That kid was exhausted enough to sleep through a threat. That was both sad and useful. Glenn made a hard call. "We do not defend this fence," he whispered. "We leave through the back before daylight." Travis mouthed, "Now?" Glenn nodded. "Now. He wants us pinned at sunrise. We do not give him sunrise." We did not have a back door, but we had a plan. Utility fences usually have maintenance gaps and weak points. Earlier, Glenn had identified a section where the ground had washed out under the fence, enough to crawl under if you were flat and careful. We moved there in silence, one at a time. Owen went first, then Lacey, then Sherry, with Ben in her arms. Ben stirred but did not fully wake. Travis followed. Marisol went next. I went next. Glenn went last, as always. We crawled under and slid into wet grass. The fence wire snagged my jacket and tore a strip off, but I kept moving. We headed toward the creek line because water noise covers footsteps. It also risks leaving tracks in mud. Every choice is a trade. We chose sound cover. Behind us, the man outside shouted once, sharp, realizing the fence was quiet. A flashlight beam swept, then another. He started moving. We could hear him now, boots in wet grass. He called out, "Find them!" More than one voice answered. He had at least two with him. We moved along the creek, staying in the low ground. The water was cold. It soaked our boots. It also muffled our steps when we had to cross shallow parts. Owen and Lacey helped Sherry over slick rocks, steadying her elbow without speaking. Ben finally woke and whispered, "Mom?" Sherry whispered back, "Quiet, we are walking." Ben shut up. That kid understood urgency. At around 4 a.m, we reached a stand of trees near a gravel pit. Glenn knew it. He had patrolled this county. He used that knowledge now, the way some people use money. He led us to an old drainage pipe that ran under a berm. We crawled into it and waited, listening. Voices passed overhead. One man said, "Check the creek." Another said, "He is gone." The leader said, "He is not gone. He is close. Keep looking." Then the footsteps moved away. That was the first time all night I believed we might survive until daylight. When the sky started to lighten, we moved again. We did not go back to the pump station. We did not go toward town. We went deeper into rural ground, toward an abandoned farmstead Glenn had seen months earlier with a metal barn and a storm cellar. That was our next draft plan. Shelter that did not announce itself. I am telling you this because it connects to a bigger point, and I need you to hear it if you broadcast. The moment you become a voice, you become a problem for someone. Not everyone. Some people will thank you. Some will rely on you. One will decide you embarrassed him, cost him money, cost him control. That person will hunt you out of pride alone. Pride kills more people than infected do, and it kills by making humans do extra work they do not need to do. So if you are broadcasting out there, keep it short, keep it mobile, never sleep where you transmit. Never transmit from where you store fuel. Never keep all your people in one spot if you can help it. I know that is harsh. I know it is lonely. Loneliness is cheaper than burial. We reached the farmstead by late morning. The barn door was partially open, swaying in the wind. The house looked stripped. Windows broken, porch sagging. The storm cellar door was still there, metal, rusted, but intact. Glenn tested it. It opened with a groan. Inside, it smelled damp, but safe enough for a temporary hide. We moved in and shut the door behind us. We did not lock it. Glenn hates locks for the same reason as before. Locks create false calm. We wedged it with a piece of wood we could kick away fast. Marisol checked everyone for cuts and blisters. Travis's heel was bleeding. Lacey had a scraped palm. Owen's shoulder was raw, where his strap rubbed. Small injuries that become big problems if ignored. We ate a small meal, no talking beyond whispers. The food tasted like metal can and salt. It still felt good to chew something that was not panic. Ben ate too fast, and Marisol slowed him down with a hand gesture. He listened. Then we made the next realistic decision. Glenn looked at Travis and Sherry and said, "Tomorrow morning you will head east. We will head north. You cannot stay with us if we keep transmitting. That man will keep following. Your kids do not deserve to be dragged into that. Sherry's face tightened. She wanted to argue. Travis looked at Lacey, then at Ben. He nodded slowly. We get it, he said. We will move quiet. No roads. Glenn said, good. No hugs, no speeches, only a plan that gave the family a chance. Later, when Marisol and Glenn were on watch and Owen finally slept, I sat by the cellar wall with the transmitter parts in my lap. I stared at them and felt something close to guilt settle in. Not dramatic guilt, just the math. Every time I talk, I help someone and I endanger someone. That is the trade. I do not get to pretend it is all good. So here is what I decided, right there in the damp cellar. I am not quitting. I'm changing the way I do it. I will broadcast only after we move, only from temporary spots, only with short bursts, only with information that saves lives right now. No more long nightly comfort talks from a fixed point. Not until the world stabilizes. If the world ever stabilizes. That is me learning from my own mistakes. It took a year and it cost us a base, fuel, gear, and nearly our lives twice in one day. I do not recommend learning the hard way. Learn from me if you can. If you're still listening out there after my earlier cut, understand this part too. There are armed groups using emergency vehicles to control movement. If you hear a siren in a world with no functioning government response, treat it as hostile until proven otherwise. Sirens mean someone is playing with the map. Also understand the other catastrophe that is creeping in, even when no one shoots. Fire, storms, bridges failing, water getting contaminated. Those things are not background anymore. Those things are frontline threats. A year in, you can do everything right, and still get wiped out by a storm that knocks a tree onto your shelter and traps you. Plan for the boring disasters the same way you plan for infected. I'm going to rest my voice for a bit and conserve battery. If I transmit again today, it will be a 2-minute burst after we move at noon. If you are within range, listen for it. If you are not, keep moving and keep your plan flexible. Glenn is on watch right now, sitting by the storm cellar door with the shotgun across his knees, eyes steady, listening to a world that refuses to stay quiet. Owen is asleep for the first time in hours. Marisol is cleaning a small cut on her thumb with the last of our alcohol wipes, still acting like tomorrow matters. It does. That is where we are. Alive, cold, dirty, making choices that would have sounded insane a year ago and still trying to do one thing right in a row, day after day.